There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where, what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology
Right.
trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining. You couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful. All right. And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is.
Quentin Tarantino just scorched modern Hollywood in a blazing interview with the always fiery Bill Maher. And honestly, it was absolutely hilarious. The iconic filmmaker didn't pull any punches, ripping into his loudest detractors and branding them as woke phonies and moral posturers. Maher, never one to stay quiet, threw in some biting commentary of his own. If you appreciate sharp, unfiltered political takes, smash that subscribe button. You won't want to miss moments this raw and entertaining.
Before we run out of time, I have to say to you, besides the great entertainment, I have always really appreciated the way you pushed back when anyone tried to stifle you, shut you up, shame you, bully you. They tried it with the last one, with Once Upon a Time in the Hollywood, some bullshit about Margot Robbie doesn't have enough lines. And you do what I wish other people would do. Instead of apologizing like a little pussy, you say, I don't agree with your assessment.
Bill Maher's disdain for Hollywood's obsession with all things woke is hardly breaking news. I've talked about it countless times on this channel. The industry's ditched real storytelling in favor of hashtag activism and moral grandstanding. But buried in all that ideological noise, a few voices still shine. And one of the brightest is Quentin Tarantino. Even Maher, a tough critic of the film world, holds him in high regard. Why? Because Tarantino's as old school as it gets. He doesn't virtue signal, doesn't cater, and definitely hasn't caught the woke bug. He makes gutsy, often provocative films that challenge his audience instead of babying them. While others stay inside the lines, he redraws the Hulk into sand. It's rare, fearless, and honestly, a breath of fresh air.
There has become a thing that's gone on, it seems like in this, especially this last year, where, what's the word I'm looking at? Ideology is more important than art.
Way more, certainly to the awards.
Yeah. And it's just, it's like, ideology trumps art. Ideology trumps individual effort. Ideology trumps good. Ideology trumps entertaining.
There's two kinds of movies, virtue signalers and superhero movies.
This is exactly why Maher holds Tarantino in such high esteem. He's one of the few left-leaning voices unafraid to speak out against the absurdity on his own side. Tarantino doesn't sugarcoat things, and Maher values that honesty in a Hollywood that's lost its creative soul to ideological posturing. Just look at the Snow White remake disaster it bombed both critically and financially. Why? Because the filmmakers were more focused on pandering than storytelling. They refused to cast little people as dwarves, citing sensitivity, and instead used CGI, robbing real actors of work they've long been proud to do. That's not progress, it's insulting. And it's exactly the kind of performative nonsense that Tarantino and Maher have no problem calling out.
You bullish on the future of movies? Because...
Well, look, you have to always look at...
Are we going to get back to that place?
Look, this happened... This comes in waves. This absolutely comes in waves, all right? So it's like, okay, just looking at the 40s, all right, that was during the wartime, but that's also the time that you had film noir, where you actually, even though with the Hays Code, you had these dark, dark stories that were being told. But then after the war was won, then you had the 50s, which was the first of the completely homogenized decades, where you couldn't say shit if you had a mouthful, all right? And every bestseller, every play that was turned into a movie, if there was anything sexual about it or anything, that's all going to be drained out of the movie. It's going to be weaned out of the movie. It's just the way it is. And then, to me, it's one of the worst decades in Hollywood is the 50s. And then the 60s, pretty much from like 1960 to 1966, was the 50s part 2.
Let's stop here for a moment, because Tarantino made a seriously thought-provoking observation. He brought up the old Hays Code, a set of rules from the 1930s that forced studios to self-censor anything considered too indecent, especially when it came to sex and morality. Back then, people saw it as a major threat to free expression, a way to neuter artistic freedom for the sake of moral order. And here's the twist. Tarantino thinks we're right back there again. Only now the censors aren't religious groups or watchdogs, they're the permanently offended woke mobs. These digital enforcers use cancel culture to go after any film or director that doesn't parrot their worldview. Artistic value gets thrown out if it doesn't check the right ideological boxes. Directors tiptoe, writers self-censor, and studios cave to Twitter tantrums. It's censorship disguised as progress, and it's every bit as chilling as the Hays Code ever was.
But then what we think of as the 60s starts in about 67, and that's when New Hollywood
Bonnie
comes out. Yeah. And that's an absolute positive response to the homogenized 50s.
So it's going to come back again.
Okay, and then it goes into the 70s, but then we went into the 80s.
All right.
And that's why you came up with politically incorrect, because that was the first. This is basically 80s part 2, what we're living through right now.
Well, I'll just take one more go at it. There's going to be a new golden age. Please be there and part of it.
Now here's something worth noting. Tarantino genuinely thinks Hollywood might finally be purging itself of the woke plague. And if that's really happening, amen to that. Frankly, this era of virtue signaling cinema has become more than just tiring, it's creatively suffocating. Instead of entertaining or inspiring, modern films often come across as bland lectures wrapped in mediocre plots. It's like imagination has been replaced by checklists and forced political messaging. If Tarantino's right and we're steering toward a reset, then bring it on. A revival where story, emotion, and compelling characters matter more than ideological box sticking would be a welcome shift. Picture a Hollywood where movies challenge and entertain instead of preach and pander. That's the version of the industry we originally fell in love with. And if this cultural cleanse is truly underway, there may finally be something to get excited about again. But during a sit-down with Joe Rogan, Tarantino made a troubling observation. Watch this.
And then there's like, okay, this guy or this woman is going to write a think piece in the New Yorker about my movie, or in the Los Angeles Times, or in the New York Times, and they're going to write some think piece about it, or on this website or that website, and they're going to go against it and talk about, oh, this is a retrograde vision, or that this is a regressive vision. Or Quentin has become right wing, and this movie has a right wing bent because of the way they, Quentin is identifying with Rick Dalton as a fucking hippie. He's that's how it's.
Is that really a take that someone had that you've become right wing because of the character in the film?
Even like a critic who liked it, A.O. Scott, goes, well, this whole vision seems more on the right than you would imagine.
It might sound a bit far-fetched, but it happens more often than you'd expect, especially from the political left. A large segment of that crowd can't watch a movie without immediately filtering it through a hyper-political lens. If a film even hints at conservative values or themes that lean right, the backlash is instant. Suddenly, it's not just entertainment, it's a declaration of war. Outrage follows. The cast, the crew, the writers, everyone gets targeted just for daring to create something that challenges their worldview. But that mindset completely misses the point of cinema. Movies aren't supposed to exist in an ideological bubble. They're meant to reflect the full spectrum of human experience, the highs, the lows, the contradictions. They're mirrors, not megaphones. And not every film is going to echo your personal beliefs. That's the beauty of art. It should provoke, question, and sometimes even offend. Dismissing a film simply because it doesn't align with your politics, that's not critique, that's censorship in disguise.
Doesn't necessarily make it wrong, make it bad, but it just seems like more on the right. Well, Rick is coming from a place more on the right, not me.
Yeah.
Per se, but I am telling the story through Rick's point of view. And then, they say something, well, how come they don't talk about, how come there aren't more black characters in the movie? How come they don't talk about the Vietnam War more? Well, basically, the movie takes place between 2 days. Okay, well, they didn't bump into Jim Brown, right, on those 2 days. All right, they saw who they fucking saw. Yeah. During those 2 days. Well, they didn't have a conversation about Vietnam in those 2 days. I can't just deal with all the hot button issues if I'm set up in a thing between 2 days. Oh, Margaret Robbie doesn't talk enough. She spends the entire movie by her fucking self. I could have given her if you were just counting lines, I could have put Mr. Saperstein in the car, with her dog, and she could have just been having a running commentary with her dog about picking up Roman's dry cleaning and getting the book, and maybe I'll go see the movie. And, that would have actually taken care of the line count, but it would have been bullshit.
Exactly. It's about time the perpetually outraged critics and the so-called social justice crowd grasp a basic truth: not every film is made to deliver a message. Some movies are meant to be fun. Some are meant to distract. And yes, some tackle heavy issues. There's room for all of it. What people forget is that filmmakers are storytellers with individual visions. Their goal isn't always to mirror their own politics. It's often about exploring different characters, perspectives, or situations. But when creators are pressured to inject political themes into stories where they don't naturally fit, that's not progress, it's creative sabotage. Forcing ideological content into narratives that don't need it waters down the story and kills its emotional impact. What makes a movie powerful isn't its politics, it's the authenticity, the emotion, the storytelling. Let artists create freely. Let films breathe without being turned into moral billboards. Let art stand on its own.
Doesn't it seem like part of the problem is just that it came out during a time where Trump was president, and like that's one of the reasons why these political takes on things, like that he's more to the right, or like I can't imagine that anybody would think that you're leaning right now, that Quentin is becoming right because your character is. That seems so stupid, but it's more of it's just a statement about the politicalization of everything.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're correct. And the thing about it, though, is, look, those kind of like academic college think pieces, they're just fine. Like in a college situation, they make sense. I can take a book or a movie and come up with some argument that goes, that's like that's more of a subtextual argument about a film. That doesn't mean I'm right, but it means I can make my little argument,
right?
For the course. But it doesn't. But I have no illusions that that's what the director was thinking about. Now, ultimately, when it comes to subtextual criticism, it doesn't matter. It's simply you making your little case. But in the heat of the moment, they're actually treated more seriously than that.
How do you parse out when you have experienced criticism about a film? Do you go over that criticism? Do you read it, or do you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? I know what I did. I love what I did. I don't give a fuck.
Well, I like to write film criticism, so I can take it with a grain of salt. One, if I know who they are, all right, then I have a sense of where they're coming from and what they're talking about.
Tarantino drives home a critical point here. Everyone has a right to their opinion, including critics. Free speech isn't reserved for one side, it applies to all, regardless of political beliefs. He knows not every viewer will resonate with his work, and he's totally fine with that. He welcomes feedback. Critique is part of the job. But where he draws the line is when criticism turns nasty, when it becomes personal, venomous, and vindictive. When people try to cancel him just because his work appeals to a different political crowd, that's when it stops being criticism and becomes character assassination. Tarantino doesn't make films to cater to the mob, he creates to express, challenge, and spark thought. Disagree with his work? Fine, say so. But don't reduce the man to a political label, or slander him for refusing to play by ideological rules. That's not commentary, that's censorship hiding behind moral outrage.
You parse out when you have experienced criticism about a film. Do you go over that criticism? Do you read it, or do you just get to a point where you're like, you know what? I know what I did. I love what I did. I don't give a fuck.
Well, I like to write film criticism, so I can take it with a grain of salt. One, if I know who they are, all right, then I have a sense of where they're coming from and where they're talking about. But like within 3 paragraphs, I see where this guy or woman is coming from, and they either like my stuff or they don't like it.
Right.
And if they're inclined to like my stuff and they go negative on it, that's interesting to see what it is that did that. I mean, a lot of the critics that like me didn't like Hateful Eight. It all came down to the fact that it was just too rough a vision for them. It was just too cynical. It was too cruel. And that's one of my favorite movies, because I feel like, wow, that's the Sam Peckinpah movie I always wanted to make. It's a fucking cruel, pitiless vision. But it's called The Hateful Eight. The idea is there's no good guys in the movie.
In the end, Tarantino's stance is a refreshing reminder that true art doesn't exist to appease. It exists to provoke, entertain, and reflect life in all its messy complexity. He's one of the few.
In the end, Tarantino's stance is a bold and much-needed reminder. Real art doesn't aim to comfort, it aims to confront, move, and reflect the complexities of real life. He's one of the rare filmmakers who hasn't surrendered to the pressures of ideological conformity And for that, he's earned even his critics' respect, Maher included. Whether he's taking aim at woke absurdities or standing up for artistic freedom, Tarantino makes one thing clear. Filmmakers should be free to tell the stories they want, without fear of being silenced. Not every movie needs to carry a political mission, and not every director should be boxed in by one. Maybe, just maybe, Hollywood is finally shaking off its performative coma. And if that's true, then we might be on the brink of a genuine creative renaissance. No more lectures, no more forced messaging, just real stories told by real artists. That's the Hollywood we need. If you're ready to leave the noise behind and hear more real talk, hit that subscribe button. You're not going to want to miss what's next. See you soon.